What's up, guys? We're going to talk about the Redcoats. I'm going to go into a little bit of deck analysis here. And if you don't know what the Redcoats is the name of the deck I posted on the BGG forums that, I think just sort of shine the light a little bit on HB Big Ice decks. They've been around for a long time, but I think at least the post, what it did is it exposed maybe how good it really can be, because I believe this deck to be tier 1, and a lot of people were saying that there was 2 decks or 3 decks or I don't know how many decks only that could win in top competition. So I decided that I really thought this deck met the criteria of tier 1, so I wanted to post it at that level of a deck. To me, tier 1 is the deck will win against players and decks of less skill and quality the overwhelming majority of the time, and has an equal chance to beat top-notch runners and top-notch decks. If I have that going into a match, where I feel like I can win with this deck at least 50% of the time or more against top tier talent and decks, then I think it's a tier 1 deck. As long as I have the other criteria met where I'm going to beat the majority of weaker runners and decks. So anyway, the concept of the deck here, the way I built it, is simply to try to extract as much money out of the runner as much as possible through a variety of ways, whether it be trashing or through the ice or even the agenda here. So any way I can get money out of the runner is good, and I have a lot of ways of doing that. I'll start with the agenda spread. I have 8, only 8 out of 49, and that's really, really key. It actually helps me shape the way I build my servers and play the game. So, for example, let's say that 2 agendas are scored early. Runner steals 1, I scored 1 early, and I have 3 in hand. So at this stage of the game, 5 agendas are out and there are 3 left in the table, and let's say there are 30 cards left in my deck. Yeah, I got flooded early, and you know what? It's not runner, it happens. However, that really, really is a significant piece of information in that there's a 1 in 10 chance the runner's going to hit an agenda per card they access in R&D. Well, in that case, I'm probably going to devote most of my resources to remote servers and HQ until maybe the board changes or something changes in the game where R&D becomes a little bit more of a priority. Not to say that I neglect R&D, especially against Shaper. Always got to be mindful of indexing in particular. I think is really the card to be watching out for. Maker's Eye is another nasty one. R&D interface you can see coming a little bit more a lot of times, or it's going to cost them quite a bit. So anyway, the low agenda density is important, and knowing where they are and how many are left is important to keep track of as you play this deck, I think. Anyway, so let's get into the agendas. We have accelerated beta test, very strong in terms of its benefit. Of course, the 3 advancements for 2 points is awesome because it's a cheap score too. But the benefit, of course, if you decide to use it, is flip the top 3 cards of your R&D. If it's ice, you may install and res it at no cost. And man, you can get some huge discounts when you start looking at Janice, Wotan. I mean, let's say you even get a Bastion installed on a server that's already too deep. You just saved yourself 6 credits because of the install plus the click it costs to install it. So 6 credits a click because it's 2 to install over a server with 2 ice on it. I mean, it all adds up, and it's a huge. In the end, it can be a monster econ card for you. Another thing you can do with it is a little bit of advanced play here that I got from Medio X Core. I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how it reads in BGG forums, Octagon, etc. He's a great player with a great mind for the game. But I'll give this credit to him. Install the accelerated beta test when you're going to score it next turn. Advance it once or twice. and have a Jackson Howard ready to go next turn. And and quite honestly, even if I don't have a Jackson Howard in hand, and if I can afford the time and money, I'll probably install Advance, the beta test anyway, because now that actually gives me 2 clicks next turn to try and find a Jackson. Or not, at least I can, yeah, I'll have 2 clicks plus my regular draw, or excuse me, 1 click plus my regular draw to try and find a Jackson so that I can score my ABT and have a spare click left over, that if I fire my ABT and agendas fall in the archives, I can still get my Jackson Howard on the table and be able to protect my archives. So little pro tip there. I think it's an amazing play that can really swing the game, and I would suggest doing that. NAPD contract is a beast in terms of its taxing ability. Having to pay 4 credits to take it is a burden for sure. And it can really open up scoring windows to score priority requisitions or accelerated beta tests, because sure, they may have just gotten 2 points from you, but the 4 credits it costs to steal that, now they're not going to have the money to run the server that I'm going to score the priority rec on next turn. So it's a very sinister card kind of in that way, but it really gets the job done. And of course, I don't play any bad pub in this deck, so I don't have to suffer the consequences of playing an APD. Priority requisition is a 3 of. I don't have too many 3-point options at this time with Haas Bayreuth. I have priority requisition, I have Project Wotan, and I have Executive Retreat. Priority requisition is the best of those 3 for this deck, simply because, again, free res on Janice or any of this ice, especially this top stuff here, is just amazing and a game changer. Project Wotan, nice card. I think it's certainly a better alternative to Executive Retreat, and having the agenda counters on it to add subroutines for ending the run on Bayreuth Ice. It's nice. It comes into play, and it's really strong. And I think it's a little bit stronger than meets the eye, because a lot of times runners are dealing with Bayreuth Ice by clicking, so it prevents that for sure. Or it can create an additional tax, which maybe it's just 1 credit, 2 credits, 3 credits, but again, an additional tax of 3 credits can be the difference of scoring or not scoring when you're playing a card like Ash. And this is like 3 credits that there's 3 free credits that you just pull right off the card, essentially, to tax the runner. So I like it for that respect, and it can also work like a Nisei too. So it's a great card. I like it. I think it's justified in terms of the benefit for a 5/3. Janice is, well, actually, let's work backwards. Playing Quandary here, it's a 0 strength code gate for a cheap res. I guess a general thought on my ice first. I got 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 10 for its strength, so pretty well covered against admin. Every single one of those ranges also has ice that ends the run, so I should be able to effectively shut out most admin decks, especially if that's all they're playing is admin. So Quandary, cheap res. I have 3 excuse me. I have 3 code gates here that runners can use Yogg to get through. And I don't want to usually play any more than 3 if I can avoid it, because a lot of times, if they're playing Zoo, I think it's fine. I really like the Data Pike if they're playing Zoo, but Yogg is a really popular breaker for code gates, of course, because it's free. But Data Pike, what it's going to do is it's going to, and Quandary, I guess, but Data Pike as well, is it's going to force them to play their Yogg. And then the overwhelming vast majority of my ice will have ways of, if their code gates, dealing with Yogg, or they're just simply not code gates. So, that way the code gates can be effective once, but then once the Yogg is out, since I only have 3 of them, I don't have to worry so much about now all my ice is nullified from Yogg. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, general thoughts there on my code gates. But the data pike, again, I think, I don't know why I didn't have this in the original deck list. I don't think I did, and I should, because it's like a baby toll booth. In early game, this card is a monster. If my first turn is install data pike, install Eve campaign, hedge fund, they run the data pike, hit it. Now they go from 5 credits to 3 credits. I still have enough money to res the Eve campaign, and that thing is going to be rolling. And unless they can get their credits up with like a dirty laundry or something right away, then they have a choice to make. Let the Eve campaign roll or click for credits to trash it. Both of those are a huge win for me. So data pike is a monster in this deck. I love it. Absolutely love it. Caduceus functions as the same thing. Essentially is taxing the runner. So they're going to hit it, and most runners, and I'll just say it, if you let the corp take the 3 credits with the Caduceus trace and you can avoid it, 9 times out of 10 you are wrong. You do not want the corp to get that money and beat that trace as much as you possibly can. It's more important than ending the run, in my humble opinion. But from a guy who's played Caduceus a million times, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't think I am. Always pay it if you can. Almost always pay it. There's no always in Netrunner. But anyway, another thing I really like about Caduceus is the fact that it's a 3 strength piece of ice. And this is kind of interesting, but at this stage in the game, and certainly this was the case earlier in Netrunner, there are very few pieces of ice that have 3 strength. And especially sentries. I think Neural Katana might be the only other one. So, when thinking about games like Atman, against Atman, you really want something to fill that 3 space, because I think especially 4 through 0 are really important pieces of ice to deal with Atman, and then of course having a couple big ones too, which are really hard to deal with Atman. But anyway, Caduceus, they're gonna pay probably to stop the credits, and they might pay to end break the end the run with the trace too. They're probably paying 3 to 5 credits to do that with, if they don't have link, they're paying 5. If they have link, they're, 1 link, they're paying 3. So yeah, a lot of people say, well, if you play 1 link like Andy or Kate, Caduceus isn't that big of a deal. And while I agree with you that paying the 3 credits is not a big deal, how many times are you going to be excited to run through a Caduceus having to pay 3 every time? You're going to need a big pile of money to be able to do that. And if you don't have that, then Caduceus is pretty strong. And it's very hard to get a big pile of money early in the game anyway, which is when Caduceus shines. So moving on, Bastion, simple, strong, 4 strength, end the run, hard barrier. A lot of times all you need is just a hard barrier, and Bastion fills that for sure. Eli, 3 strength or 3 res, 4 strength, 2 subs, and the run. I'm sold. That's as good of a card as I can imagine, honestly. Of course, the drawback of it is that you can click through it. And let's just talk about clickable ice for a second, because that is certainly a drawback to Bioroid ice, and the reason why they can justify having 4 strength on a card that costs 3 to res, or Victor 5 for 5, because you can click through it. There's other ways to get through it than just paying the strength cost with a breaker. So what I'm always trying to do with Bioroids is stack them as much as possible. Because with all of these, at least with the Bioroids that I've chosen, you can click through one piece of ice, but you will not be able to click through two. And you certainly will not be able to click through three, most likely, even if you have an E3 implant. So, that said, I try to maybe get toll booths and bastions and data pikes, maybe, and Caduceus on their own servers while I try to get Eli's and Victor's and Heimdall's maybe in a server of their own. So I try to clump the Biroids as much as possible. So anyway, Eli Corroder costs 4, Snowball costs 5. That's a lot to deal with there, or the 2 clicks, which is also fine, because if they're clicking through an Eli, chances are it's on a central server where I put it, and it's going to be difficult to find one of my 8 agendas. So again, paying the clicks to lose efficiency there is good. Moving on to Ichi. I don't usually get a lot of trashing with Ichi. If I do, that's awesome. But it's more or less just a pain in the butt to deal with. Mimic can't deal with it very easily. Unless the Fem token itself is on Ichi. Fem can deal with it not very well. Even Garrote costs, 5? So it's tough to deal with. It's pretty strong, and of course you can get the trash benefit occasionally as well. Victor 2 is a beast, and I think my original deck had 2, at least the post had 2. Now I have 3, because a couple of reasons. One, I just think it's a bargain, the 5 for 5, but more importantly, I want to have the flexibility to shut out Yogg's, Yogg Data Sucker combination, and having 6 5-strength code gates gives me the ability to do that if I need to most games. If I have a Victor 2.0 double stacked on archives and they have a Yogg and data suckers, after a sweep they can no longer effectively get through that Victor with a Yogg and clicking for the rest of the game. And then of course Tollbooth, and Tollbooth does that even better. Having a Tollbooth in front of a Yogg, or when they have a Yogg, is the ultimate answer to Yogg, I think. So, that's a big reason actually why I wanted to add that extra 5-strength code gate, because Yogg is so popular, and being able to shut out a Yogg is just a great feeling when that they can't do anything else the rest of the game because they can't get a data sucker token off you. So Tollbooth, Tollbooth since core has probably, in my opinion, been the single-handed best piece of ice. There's a million other pieces of ice that could get the argument, of course. But Tollbooth is, especially, at least for this deck, is probably the best ice I have. Because there is almost no good way of dealing with it. The best way to deal with it is a Fem, which is awesome. But you're gonna, with a Fem, of course, you're gonna pay 1 now to get through it, which really makes it nullifies it once the Fem is played. Most likely, though, unless you're doing like a test run scavenge to cheat the Fem in, you're paying 9 credits to get a Fem in. So I paid 8, you lost 3, and then paid 9, and then 1 more to break the toll booth, so 9 to install the Fem, and then 1 more to bypass it. So I paid 8, so you could pay 12, 13? Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. So, and that's assuming they even have a Fem in their deck. A Knight or a Torch is the second best way to deal with it, I think, and that costs 5 per run. Actually, the second best way to deal with it's probably a Parasite and Data Sucker. But even that's going to cost you the face check for 3 credits and the click, and then the next time you try to put the data sucker tokens on it, you're gonna have to pay the 3 costs again. So so from that respect, I think Tollbooth is just so strong. It taxes the runner, takes their money away. Like I said, the idea of this deck is to just create an economic leverage. And nobody ever wants to get a toll booth res in their face unless they know it's coming and they're on like less than 3 credits. Then you might run it just to, try and get their corp to spend $8. But it's just a monster. I love it. Heimdall 2.0 is really good. I mean, it's 11 res cost. I know there's people who believe it's cost too much to play, and maybe they're right, but I've just found it to be a really, really strong card that gets the job done, and it's effective. So whether it costs too much or not, it's still effective, and I think that, I'll talk about brain damage for a second here, because I think that is really kind of the intangible benefit of Heimdall 2 versus maybe Heimdall 1, is that you can really hit them for 2 brain damage. And I think brain damage is kind of an interesting anomaly in the game when you're talking about a deck that's not designed to flatline, because it can, ultimately it can really hurt a runner. I think especially if you get them early. Number one, obviously, just the damage itself, you can get some key cards. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, if I can land 2 brain damage on a runner, then what I've effectively done is now maybe shut down. It's certainly making it more difficult for criminals to find the inside job emergency shutdown combination, or shapers to have a test run scavenge combination. So you're limiting, of course, the amount of cards they can hold in their hand, which is going to limit their ability to create combinations. And I think there's something to that. I think there's a little bit more than meets the eye with brain damage. Not that that's the reason why I play Heimdall 2, but I think that's an intangible thing that can really give you a boost in certain games. And then not to mention, it's just really difficult to deal with. I mean, Deus Ex is the best way to deal with it, but that's only going to get you through one time, and then you still have to deal with it every other time. So its biggest drawbacks, of course, shutdown, and that's with. I think, honestly, I don't ever want to see a toll booth get shut down, or any of these really, but I think 8 cost or less, I can usually manage. If they shut that down, especially 5 or less, I can handle that. But most of the time I can handle if they shut down a toll booth. I have enough money to be able to re-res it without issues. If I get one of these shut down, I may or may not have a chance to re-res it the rest of the game. But I'm also not really going to res one of these big pieces unless it's a really important time in the game and I really need that piece of ice to be resed. Otherwise, I'm just going to try to get it in free with an ABTR priority rec. And being able to do that is awesome. So Heimdall 2, just I've probably scored more agendas behind a Heimdall 2 and an Ash than any other server that I've built. Just one Heimdall 2 gets the job done with an Ash. Wotan, definitely don't want more than one. No need, it's unique, and I may or may not get it into the game. But again, I'm gonna pay for it only if I'm desperate or it's really important that I do. This doesn't induce brain damage. It can, the runner can voluntarily take it, which isn't as good, of course, because they're prepared for it. But nonetheless, Wotan is never going to be fun to deal with. Even a Fem is going to be 4 to get by it, which is a lot. And of course, Janice the monster. Janice is didn't have it in my original deck. I think everybody, at least for me, a lot of people, I was attracted to Janice. I'm like, oh man, 4 brain damage, that's amazing. And then I played it, and I'm like, it costs so much. There's my crazy cat going. Don't mind him, he's crazy. Anyway, I wanted so bad for this card to work, and it was just so expensive, and I gave up on it, and I thought it was garbage. Well, it comes back as a one-of in this deck, and I think it's a great one-of. I think that, for one, it's an ace in the hole. It gives me an additional dynamic for a win condition sometimes. Especially if I'm able to get some brain damage, maybe with a Heimdall 2, I might just keep this as a surprise at any point in the game. Hit them with it and kill them or cripple them, put them in a bad spot, and then they have to deal with it. So maybe they'll shut it down. That would suck. But, man, whoever wants to see a Janice. If you're a runner, 99 times out of 100, the last thing you want to see them res is a Janice. So I like it for that. Plus, again, the free reses I can get. So that's a little bit of my ice layout here. Oh, another thing I want to say about Janice quickly. If a runner accesses it in HQ or R&D and they know you have it, and then you play any piece of ice from that point forward, they're going to think that could be Janice. And if you have 15 credits or more, they're always going to think that could be Janice. So, you might have just installed simply a data pike there, but they're thinking that could be Janice. So, it's also a nice deterrent if they even see it ahead of time. Okay. Let's go on. So, talk about our non-advanceable assets here, like Ash and Jackson first, and then we'll get into Econ. So, Ash MVP, Ash for President. Ash basically supplements like Biotic Labor, I would say, or Sansan City Grid, or or maybe like Psychographics potentially. I mean, it's a card that creates ways to score, similar to what I think those cards do. And basically, in case you're not familiar with Ash, put it. You're going to run a trace. If you win the trace, then the only card they can access is Ash in that server. So naturally, if I have a server, and that this is not uncommon, let's say I have a server that goes Victor 2, Heimdall 2. Well, they somehow get through my Heimdall 2. Let's say they inside job my Heimdall 2, and they click through my Victor 2. Wow, they just got through for free. Well, hey, you know what? I res Ash, beat you in the trace, and you just spent your entire turn getting through my server. I win the trace, end your turn, I score next turn. Thank you very much. And that's pretty much how Ash works, and it works very well. And with Ash, if you get it early, it can really help you rush agendas. I like to put an Ash on an Adanis campaign early behind a piece of ice if I can, to get my econ a little protection early. So Ash just really makes the deck run. It protects high valuable cards when you need it. Late game, if you're in a pinch where you are the only thing you can lose to is maybe like a Nerve Agent on HQ, or maybe just regular draws on HQ, or indexing, or R&D interface, Maker's Eye. Put these in your centrals to give you a little bit of a boost there, or protection there. So Ash is really versatile and really, really powerful, and the deck would be nothing without it. It would the amount of games I would lose. There's of all the cards in this deck that I could afford to take out, I think Ash should be the last card I would take out. So anyway, Jackson Howard. If you don't know why I'm playing Jackson Howard, welcome to Netrunner. This is Jackson Howard. So he is the savior. We call him the savior for a reason, because the worst thing that can happen to you in this deck is really getting agenda flooded early, say against like a criminal. Well, hey, that happens. You have Jackson out. Just push all your agendas, overdraw, pass 5 cards, get all your agendas into archives, refresh them back in R&D, get a clean hand, and you are well on your way to basically resetting the game. And that's what you want against especially criminal. You want to delay the game, delay the early game as much as you can, so that you can get your ice resed and start making them deal with it, which is not their strength. So and same thing, like against Shaper, what you want to do against Shaper is almost the exact opposite, is you want to try and score as early as possible. So I might get a server, let's say Adanis, Victor, Ash, and I let the while the Adanis is running off, I'd say I get an Eli above that Victor. Well, if I can get a Jackson on the table, I can start rushing now to look for agendas. early game, while the shaper doesn't have their goods to get through my stuff, rush through, find agendas, install it behind the Ash. Once the Adanis trickles off, or I might even just trash the Adanis with like 3 credits left on it so I can score. But it opens up scoring windows like that. Plus, I talked about how it protects the ABT runs. So enough on that. Jackson is amazing. Run 3. End of story. At least for this deck. Adanis campaign and Eve campaign. Well, Adanis is 4 turns of economic glory. So as long as it's reasonably protected in the case, like I've described, with an Ash or maybe a couple pieces of ice that makes it really tough to go trash, you're going to get a lot of money out of it. And the nice thing too is once a server is remote server's already built, you're probably going to get more value out of future Adonises because it's going to be not worth their time and money to run a big server, usually just to trash an Adanis, or especially if there's an Ash on it, to deal with an Ash and an Adanis. So Adanis usually becomes, when it's reasonably protected, a reasonably fast burst of econ over, 3-4 turns. So that's pretty cool. Eve campaign is likely my favorite card still, at least my favorite asset, trickle asset in the game. There's no doubt about that. But, the way I think about Eve is, I install it, gain a credit. That's not always going to be the case, but since I'm playing Engineering in the Future, there's a very high probability that when I install it, I'm going to get a credit. So, install, gain a credit. I'm at +1. Now, I'm likely not going to protect it. Okay, now if they're Wizard, I might, or if they're playing an Imp, I probably will, or Bank Job, I'm going to be careful of that. But most of the time, I'm going to play Eve out there by itself. And not res it, of course, right away. And then when the next turn, if they run it, now they're going to run Eve. That costs them a click. They're going to look at it. Most of the time, runners will not trash it if it's not resed. So they just looked at it and left it, and they take their turn. Res Eve. Okay. So now, after resing Eve, I gained 1 for installing it, paid 5 to res it. I'm at -4, and then I take 2 credits immediately off it. I'm at -2. So -2. Now, let's say that the runner, and now this is, of course, assuming some things like they don't have Desperado or whatever, but now the Eve is sitting there again in an unprotected server, and now the runner goes and trashes it. Okay? So they've now spent another click and 5 credits to trash my Eve campaign. That was basically for me a click a click and -2 credits was my tax on that, and for them it's 2 clicks and 5 credits. So I think every single time under those circumstances with this deck, almost every single time, especially early, I think that is a win for this deck, because all you're trying to do is create a rift between your credit pool and theirs. And that is exactly what I just outlined to you and why Eve works so well in this deck. And I know a lot of people play Grindel Refinery. Great card. Bursty as all heck. Induces runs, which is great. But in terms of just a pure economic, simple way, without all the advancing and blah, 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 simple way to create an economic leverage. So I love Eve. I'm sure that just came through like crazy, but now you know why. Okay, so Hedge Fund and Restructure, I mean, they seem like no-brainers, especially Hedge Fund. I think 99% of Corp decks are going to play Hedge Fund, maybe 95%. But anyway, absolutely no reason to not play it in this deck. It's a powerful card. Still probably the best. Excuse me here. Still probably the best card you want to see in your opening hand. It's really nice. Really nice card. Real strong burst. Can't be trashed unless it's imped. Same with Restructure. Getting 10 credits is usually not a concern with this deck. So, sometimes you gotta maybe not res a piece of ice or two to build up to the 10. So there's a little bit of a liability in that sense. But if you look at it in the big picture, the extra credits you're going to get are usually well worth the risk of not resing ice, so that you can get your ice res and then maybe score behind an Ash the next turn or on an Ash the next turn. So Restructure, beautiful card, very strong, very bursty, and Subliminal Messaging, which I don't think you necessarily need in this deck. I think this is kind of a it's on the bottom here by itself. Ironically, I think this is kind of an auxiliary card spot here for this deck. So it could probably be like an aggressive secretary. It could probably be maybe even a cerebral overrider. That might be kind of fun. But I think you could maybe another piece of ice. I think there's different things you could probably do with Subliminal Messaging. It's really nice, of course, if you get it early, because a lot of this ice is not going to be too exciting for the runner to just run for the sake of running it. And so you can get a nice little econ pull out of it, but obviously with one, if it's on the bottom of the deck, you're going to get almost nothing out of it. So, but I think that's true for any card that sits on the bottom. You're not really going to get anything out of it. So anyway, that being said, that's a summary of each card there, and some of the reasons why I chose them and how they fit within the context of the deck. With regional season coming up, I would expect there to be some changes before I sit down and play face-to-face against my first opponent. I would hate for them to be a person watching these videos and seeing everything that I do and why I do them. So I'm certainly going to have some different changes. I will play this deck, a variation of this deck, because I believe, honestly, even if every card is known to the runner, they still have to beat it. So, and that's kind of what's cool about this deck, is there's no surprises. You just have to simply beat it. And, you can, like, if you're playing a Scorch tactic, that can get completely eliminated if they have more money than you, or, a couple of Plastic Carapaces. There's sort of, gimmicky, for lack of a better word, gimmicky ways of beating those decks. There is no gimmicky way of beating this deck. You just have to simply beat it. So it's tough almost every single game. So for that, I love it. It's a great deck. I hope that, I know they've gotten some good feedback from people who have played it and said they liked it. So there's a lot of variations. They're all great. A million ways you can play it. This is one of them. And last thought here is I plan on now sort of taking this deck, at least the vast majority of it. You might see changes here and there from my videos going forward, but take this deck here and sort of use it now that you know what it is, and teach various aspects of how to play it as I go through different games. So maybe talk about like where to play ice and why I'm playing ice in certain places. So to give you a little bit more comprehensive, detailed, strategic analysis of the deck and how to play it. That was overwhelmingly the voice on BGG saying that's what you guys wanted more of. So I'll do my best to do that, and I hope this is a good start. It only took me about 8 tries, 8 takes for me to get this one done, where I finally feel, I think, pretty decent about it. So anyway, I digress, and hope you enjoyed it. Over and out.